Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling The Fossil Fuel Lobby Oil Money Soaked Politics Trap Biden Dem Energy Policy in the Fossil Fuel Age. So, we have with the rising or the risen energy prices after the invasion of Ukraine and by Russia, and also a number of other factors. We have higher energy prices, and we have a Biden pleading with various fossil producers to produce more oil and we have a retreat from the promise of the invasion and the attempted boycott of Russian oil and Russian natural gas, of a turbocharged move toward toward renewable energy, toward and energy efficiency and energy conservation. And so we have a repeat of the mistakes of the past. And I've written about this a number of different ways over the last 15 years or so. And one way I've talked about it is a function of the cheap energy contract, which is a social contract that is a political construct that where you have the public, and you have to see this in the media and so forth and so on, holding political leaders responsible for the rising price of energy, or the risen price of energy, the too high price of energy relative to expectations, and you have political trouble for those leaders. And so anyway, and this is something that I would, maybe you could also call this a low-level equilibrium trap. So if you can imagine, policy and economic situation can form certain kinds of equilibrium where you have feedback loops that keep policymakers and policy in a certain fixed place. You have in this situation the United States in particular, but also other nations, trapped in the age of oil, or the fossil fuel age, and they've been only taking hesitating steps to or partial steps, or maybe no steps at all, but mostly partial steps into the age of renewable energy, or certainly away from oil-driven internal combustion engine-driven transport, and also fossil fuel fueled heating and so forth and so on. So electrification, among other things, of both buildings and transportation being two key components of ending the age of oil and ending the age of natural gas, among other things. So and fossil fuels more generally. So they're necessary but not sufficient conditions, obviously, because you need also renewable energy generators attached to those electric grids or electric devices, electric storage media like batteries, in order to use it, and also to reduce or eliminate emissions from those from electricity, from energy use, or also to become independent, depending on your view, become independent of fluctuations in the supply and the cost of oil and natural gas. So anyway, so this is a trap where this low-level equilibrium trap, where policymakers find themselves just simply running to stay in place, or even running backwards into the past. And we have with Biden, unfortunately, if given the very short history of his presidency, that he, had this Build Back Better agenda that was an effort to start very miniature steps to electrify certain features of the U.S. economy, to do a mini climate, sort of mini Green New Deal, even though he didn't call it that, and he's opposed to that idea. Um, but it was sort of built into that anyway. That that agenda was scuttled by him, and also by Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, and scuttled by him in the sense of he didn't really want to scuttle it, but he also didn't have enough interest really in pushing forward the this agenda that he sort of embraced, or he kind of embraced during his campaign, and also used, and this is something that's important, used to attract the progressive wing, the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, which is quite representative of a large portion of the base, whether they identify themselves as Bernie Sanders supporters or not, but people who support the kind of government initiatives that would lead to, among other things, a Green New Deal, or a becoming independent of oil, becoming, protecting people, using government to protect people from the ravages of climate change, so forth and so on. So now, on the other hand, people are caught in an inflationary period or spiral, you could say, or in where they're looking for any remedy, including remedies which they don't approve of, but they want cheaper gas. And there are ways to get cheaper gas, which are the best way to get cheaper gas, which is to stop using, to reduce demand for gas. And I mean, I'm using gas in the word, I'm talking about fossil fuels in general. So oil, natural gas, so forth and so on, to reduce demand by efficiency, by conservation, by and also by rapidly doing a mobilization, a wartime style mobilization to become independent of fossil fuels as an economy overall. And so anyway, so you have there was this promise anyway with the invasion of Ukraine that countries like Western European countries in particular, because they are on the hot seat, they are the ones who import the most, and they have been supporting the war effort in Ukraine by continuing to buy fossil fuels from Russia, and with the increased cost of those, they're making out very well. In other words, that the Russian economy is doing quite well despite the various sanctions that have been levied on it. So, and therefore, the effect of any sanctions is blunted, or even paradoxically not. There's in certain ways an improvement in the Russian economy in certain areas. So, but anyway, and certainly for the fossil fuel oligarchs or billionaires that are including Putin, who are the dominant political actors in that country. So, anyway, so we have a stalling in general, but the United States is particularly behind because it's particularly dependent in some ways on fossil fuel in general, even though it's not that dependent on Russian fossil fuel. So maybe there's a rough equality in terms of backsliding. Okay, if we think about the overall project of getting off fossil fuels, I mean, it's not. I'm not saying many countries are doing better. Italy has been offering. The Italian government has been offering a big subsidy for a green renovation program, and so there are other governments that are doing a lot better than the U.S. government in this regard. So in the last period of last 4 months. So, but anyway, you have with the U.S. political constellation, a particular problem is that our money, or corporate money, runs our politics to a greater extent than it does in other countries. And you have politicians like Joe Biden who mouth various commitments or fine, not commitments, the wrong word, fine sentiments or fine promises, let's say, to do certain things, but they lack the will, it seems, almost to, or they do lack the will, but they also lack the political constellation in their administration to really put these things into action. And they surround themselves with people who really tend to say no to the bigger, more ambitious steps that need to happen. So I think that there are varying degrees to which one can pursue medium term steps or medium level steps, but ultimately we need to be doing the most radical or the much more radical and more decisive moves away from fossil fuels, and they will pay off very quickly. They will have some immediate costs in terms of in terms of money costs, but also in terms of convenience and so forth and so on. But they will have the most and soonest payoff in terms of stabilizing the prices of oil and natural gas and so forth and so on, because we will just be using less of them. Okay, and to do that kind of move requires both a political will, a sense of being able to defy corporate interests, defy business interests that complain about various costs and so forth and so on, or also that complain about their businesses being threatened. And so the fossil fuel industry needs to be treated as a business that needs to be excised from the economy. Maybe those corporate entities will transform themselves in terms of the money, but the ownership and use of their capital stock in refining, in extraction of fossil fuels needs to be excised from the economy. It needs to be written out of the economy as soon as possible, and that's not something those companies want to do, and they'll make all kinds of excuses, and it requires a politician with a great deal of independence of from those companies in terms of their political, their lobbyists and so forth and so on, to be able to make those steps. Furthermore, beyond that, it requires also a moral commitment, a deep moral commitment, to protecting, human life, protecting the people of your country. That deep moral commitment is something that is not to be assumed in any political leader, and it exists in some political leaders more than others, and but the more corrupt politics is, the less a politician is likely to be able to have that and sustain that over a political career. That moral commitment, and furthermore, beyond that, you need a economic framework that creates the policy space for government action. Okay, and that means being able to run deficits, having monetary sovereignty, or access to lenient terms from monetarily. So if one has a currency that is dependent on another currency, lenient terms to undergo green development, but best is monetary sovereignty, where the government can decide to create a policy space, a potential policy space. Sounds like an abstract word. Take inventive actions, create new realities by spending money into the economy, by either creating new government organizations that do not conform necessarily to the profit motive. In fact, that are about human thriving in human protection and of all the people, not just a particular capital stock, which a business tries to do, but to create new, both new, you could call it capital, but new useful tools, useful infrastructure, so forth and so on, but that doesn't conform to the logic of accumulation and increasing profit to a private entity, or for that matter, to a government that acts like a private entity. And there are in the oil industry, for instance, state oil companies that act with a logic of accumulation in terms of accumulating money by selling oil and gas to other countries or maybe internally. But anyway, they become dependent on the revenues from that. So anyway, so this potential space needs to be created of where governments, and this is modern money theory or modern monetary theory, is the economic theory that is probably the only one that explains this policy space and how it grows and it shrinks in terms of the people's commitment or political leaders' commitment to creating these new realities, okay, and creating new infrastructure. In this case, for becoming independent of fossil fuels, new infrastructure, new subsidizing public transit so it's free so people use it. Or in Germany, in the case, it's €9 a month to use regional trains and local and regional trains, not their inner city fast trains, but pretty fast, regional trains and so forth and so on for a month. And they're extending that all throughout the summer. And that requires subsidy from the government. And so the German government doesn't have the monetary sovereignty but they just happen to have this commitment, and they have the infrastructure already there with the existing rail system, which is very passenger rail friendly, and also just a lot better rail infrastructure than we have in the United States. So anyway, so the and rail system, not just the infrastructure, but a whole operating rail system that is far superior to our own, especially for passenger rail. So anyway, but to really take that to the next step, the German government, and for that matter, or to sustain it for a long time, they would need to invent this policy space to use the currency, the creation, the fiat capacity of governments to create new currency by spending, to use that as a tool to enlarge the policy space that focuses on the purposes of becoming fossil fuel independent, and or independent of fossil fuels. Okay, and so anyway, and that so there's the purpose, the moral commitment, and there's the policy space are particularly, and also and the context of a politics where government leaders are able to be independent of corporate interests and the interests of short-sighted capital accumulation and capital and money profit accumulation via capital accumulation. So anyway, that and also a willingness to fight in the United States, a willingness to fight those interests, to show oneself to be ready to fight for the people and for the future. And so that really that's something that the current Democratic Party leadership does not have, and some progressives might have it. They need to show themselves to have that. I have, in the last video, I hope I put my mouth at least my political hopes for 2024 with AOC, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, so that I think she is closest to someone who has these abilities to create this potential space about a potential this policy space, using both her moral commitments, and she needs to show more in terms of her ability to fight, and also I think more clarity about the use of the instrument of government in economic terms, in terms of the fiat creation of new money, because a true Green New Deal, which is her, partly her child, so to speak, is her along with the Sunrise Movement, a true Green New Deal requires trillions of new spending, and that needs to be represented clearly and to the American people, and also to government leaders and to bankers and so forth and so on, and to the private sector as being what it is, and that also going back a few steps to the ability to fight to also with the fossil fuel industry say, look, we're going to excise you or your capital. You can decide to use your capital in some other ways that are not adding to our greenhouse gas burden and our use of fossil fuels, but you have to write off your fossil fuel extraction and refining infrastructure. Or some people argue that government should nationalize these things and then taper and create with a plan to just taper off the use of fossil fuels to extinguish the fossil fuel industry by first putting it in public hands, and then, which is not guaranteed that it would extinguish it, but you need to do that with the intention and with a very concrete plan that includes, literally pipeline by pipeline, refinery by refinery plans to dismantle and to clean up, do toxic waste cleanup for those refineries and those all those things, which are it's a very, very big task, and the government should, if they buy it, they should buy those assets at fire sale prices, because there's going to be lots of expenditure that they are taking on themselves, which the government can afford, but it becomes the main impetus of government spending and government policy should be making the use of those fuels obsolete, and that means electrify, renewable energy, conservation, efficiency, all those things. So anyway, so I hope I will return to this many times in future episodes, but I just wanted to point this out on the occasion of, among other things, Joe Biden going to visit Saudi Arabia and among other places, and just giving sort of a overview of what's going on, and this talk a little bit about some of the language that I think is maybe helpful in seeing what's going on. So anyway, so if you have any thoughts about this particular topic, please share those in the comments below. If you like this video, please like it, and also please subscribe to Politics 2100, and I will see you in the next video.